Lifespan development. As I stated earlier, how do we develop from birth through death? We teach a whole course on this called developmental psychology. How do we develop physically? How do we develop cognitively? How do we develop socially? Briefly, we know that birth is caused by the female reproductive cell connects with one of 300 million sperm. Sex is determined, the sex of the child that is determined by the 23rd pair of chromosomes. XX in female, XY in male. Briefly, development goes like this. The zygote, 0 to 2 weeks, embryo, 3 months to birth, fetus, embryo 2 weeks to 3 months, fetus 3 months to birth. Now here's a word you need to know. We know that when we talk about developmental psychology, there's a term called cohort, C-O-H-O-R-T. Cohort are a group of people that are born approximately at the same time. For example, I'm a member of the cohort group called the baby boomers, where when men and women were coming back from war and economic times were better, there was a big increase in birth. And now we see how it's affecting us. A lot of baby boomers are retiring. So that's a cohort group. Generation X, cohort group. I understand the latest cohort group is called the millennials. Have you heard that term? Those that are born, I guess, recently, that are really technologically adapted. See, believe it or not, there was no email when I was young. No iPods. Wasn't even microwaves until I was older. When we talk about newborns, and we talk about prenatal development, a term that's important to know is called teratogens. T-E-R-A-T-O-G-E-N-S. Teratogens. Teratogens actually literally translates to terror within. This is where the fetus or the embryo is exposed to harmful, usually environmental substances, teratogens. For example, we know that women who drink when they're pregnant may subject their unborn child to fetal alcohol syndrome. Women who smoke may subject their unborn child to low birth weight, premature. So teratogens, harmful substances that affect the female and the unborn child. There's also an important term called critical period. Critical period is defined as the prenatal period where a teratogen will harm the unborn child. For example, rubella, German measles, is a teratogen during the critical period of the first trimester. If a woman is exposed to German measles, the child may be born blind, profoundly retarded. A friend of mine's mother, that's what happened to her. Sadly, her daughter only lived to her 30s. She was profoundly retarded because she was exposed to rubella during the first trimester. That was the critical period. Now, a woman could be exposed to rubella second or third trimester, and probably there will be no damage done. So know what that is, critical period and teratogens. Temperament. This is a current theory in psychology, that people are born with certain traits and characteristics. They say that babies, as soon as they're born, they express certain temperaments. Any parents in this class, raise your hand. They say there are now 4 temperaments. Easy, they sleep well, they laugh, they pass gas. difficult, they fidget, they're colicky, slow to warm up, they don't want to be touched. You have a child like that? Okay. And shy is the most recent temperament. There's arguments against temperament, though. We hear to temperament theory means that a shy baby will be shy throughout his or her life. We don't know that that's true. Depth perception. Studies have shown, and look at it's called the visual cliff experiment, that babies can perceive depth. Now, when we talk about cognitive development, again, that word means thinking and mental processes. There's one name that comes out, and that's the great Jean Piaget, Piaget. Jean Piaget studied his own children to come up with his theory of cognitive development. He was a Swiss biologist, not a psychologist. Now write this down. You're not going to find it in your textbook. Jean Piaget was called a discontinuous theorist. Discontinuous theorist. What does this mean? It means that he believed people develop in distinct, identifiable stages, discontinuous. Whereas those that disagree with him, they think we develop gradually. It's not so identifiable. Let's talk about Jean Piaget's cognitive stages of development. First of all, there's a word that you know called schema. S-C-H-E-M-A. Plural, schemata. Schema is a framework that organizes information. Framework that organizes information. And we see that as we develop, our schemata develops. Anybody here have a 3-year-old child? No? Anybody here have a child that was 3 at one time? Okay, I knew that. When your child was 2 or 3, and you have a dog like me named Monty, I have a picture of him on my cell phone. I love Monty. Other people have their spouses. I have my dog. Anyway, so Monty, your child, say his name is Biff. Biff would see Monty, and he sees that Monty's a 4-legged creature, right? And then you take Biff for a drive out in the countryside, and he sees a cow. And what does he say? Monty. All 4-legged creatures are Monty, right? Because they have not developed a schema. It has not been developed to distinguish between the two. Now, the specific stages from 0 to 2 is called the sensory motor stage, because this is when children are developing their senses and they're starting to move. By the way, Piaget also distinguished between what's called individual development and normative development. For example, most children start walking at about 9 months to 13 months. If your child starts walking before that, it doesn't mean he's going to be a super athlete. If he walks after that, it doesn't mean that he's slow. Okay? Normative versus individual. 0 to 2. Sensory motor. Some highlights of this stage. There is something called object permanence. They do not have object permanence. This is where object permanence is when you realize that an object still exists even though it's away from you. That's why there's children get anxious when mommy leaves because they don't know if she's coming back or not. But in your book, there's a picture. You put a little blanket over the child's ball. It's gone, mysteriously. Then you lift the blanket up. Ooh, it came back. No object permanence. 0 to 2, hallmark of that stage.